Hi there and welcome to my channel. If you're new here, karibu sana. If you're a returning subscriber, karibu. And if you haven't subscribed yet, kindly subscribe. All right. So I decided to switch things up a little bit today and do a voice over rather than a video as usual. So listen to the words. So today's video will be about self-concept. I'll be doing a series on self-concept for the next few weeks. And today I'll specifically be looking at how you create your own pretty privilege. Now, this topic on pretty privilege is nothing new. However, in our context, within the African context, it's not something that we speak about so often, because I understand the dynamics are a bit different as compared to the West, where, of course, they have different races, different phenotypes. So the idea of beauty is very different, and certain races and certain phenotypes get preferred than others. The whole idea of pretty privilege is that some people have it easier in life because they are pretty. There's something about being pretty that just makes people treat you better because of how they perceive you. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. However, I'll be taking a different angle, in the sense that I'll be looking at how you as an individual create your own pretty privilege. Yes, sure, part of it is how people perceive you, but I believe the most important thing is how you perceive yourself, your self-concept. All right. So I'm a pretty confident person. I have always been confident, even when I was overweight. I believe at some point I was like 82 kgs, I think, right after high school. Of course, I weigh a lot less now, but even then, I was very, very confident in myself. So I never really doubted myself. Obviously, there are things that I hoped were better, but generally speaking, I just really had a very, very high self-confidence and a very high self-concept of myself. And so the thing now, actually get this sense that a lot of people look at me, or they have this perception that I have an ego, which I do. I will not deny it. I do have a bit of an ego. Some people even may think that I'm a bit delusional in terms of how I view them myself, and I don't see any big deal in that, because you see, I own how I view myself. I own how I feel about myself, which I think is very, very important. It's very important to own how you view yourself. It's very important to validate yourself. It's very important not to have that belief that you are less than. It's very, very crucial, because at the end of the day, I've met people whom are considered beautiful, but they have very low self-esteem. I've met people who are considered to be beautiful, but they have this very negative perception, not only of themselves but of the world. So their attitude kind of erases the beauty that we see on the surface. So I believe it's an inside job first and foremost, more than even what is seen on the surface. Beauty and the idea of pretty privilege is what you feel about yourself. And so self-concept, when you think about it, is the stories you tell yourself about yourself in a nutshell. More definitively, it's how we as individuals perceive ourselves in terms of the knowledge we have of ourselves, the beliefs we have about ourselves, the feelings that we have about ourselves. And of course, when you think about it from that perspective, it is tied to our self-esteem. It is also tied to our self-awareness, and it's also tied to our social self. And the social self, I think, is where now, if you already have a low self-esteem, that is where now it ends up being even worse off, because if you already have a low self-esteem, and then now your social self, where you're supposed to be interacting with people, it means that you're always constantly seeking validation, or you're easily triggered by people, or you just have this sense of anxiety when you're dealing with people. So the whole point of today's video is to really insist how important it is to have a very high self-concept, how important it is to believe in yourself in terms of the beauty that you have, both inwardly and outwardly, obviously. Because you find that you might be beautiful on the outside, but if you have low self-esteem, you won't even put in effort, you'll not be confident. There's this video that trended some time back, about 2 or so years ago, by this creator called O Stefko. Now, this particular, let me just give a caveat. I do not particularly like watching this creator because I feel she's quite negative. I don't like her energy generally. I find her to be a bit whiny. However, that particular video was my first interaction with her, and I watched the entire video. But after that, I could not for the life of me consume any more of her content. But anyway, so she did this video that trended some 2 or so years ago, and she was talking about pretty privilege and how she does not have pretty privilege. Now, I'm not trying to invalidate her feelings, although it might seem like I am. The funniest thing is, or the weirdest thing is, when I looked at her, I actually saw myself in the sense that we quite resemble. Yeah. So while she's here talking about she does not have pretty privilege, on the other hand, I wake up in the morning feeling like I'm the best thing since sliced bread. Like God really took his time to create me, you know. And I'm looking at her talking about how she does not have pretty privilege, and to be honest, I cannot relate. However, let me give another caveat. I do understand I have to approach subject of pretty privilege contextually, because she's African American, she lives in America, so obviously the politics of beauty, they are very different from the politics of beauty here in Africa, because we barely ever really compare ourselves to each other here in Africa, in the sense that obviously we are different, yes, but the differences are not so glaring as they are in the West, because of race, because of culture, texturism, because of futurism, and all those other things. But for us here, I mean, I don't wake up in the morning thinking, what is the shape of my nose? I don't wake up in the morning thinking the color of my skin. Like, I wake up in the morning and I just exist and I live my life. So I do understand, I kind of understand where she's coming from, but I do not agree with her. And this is a reason why I do not agree with her. She stated that one does not get to decide that they have pretty privilege. Other people get to decide that you have pretty privilege. Yes and no. Obviously, it's all a matter of perception in terms of how people perceive you. But you see, like I mentioned earlier, you could be the hottest thing or the most beautiful person, but if you have a stanky attitude, obviously that diminishes how people view you. So it all begins with your self-concept. If you believe, obviously, again, we are all endowed differently. In as much as I believe I'm the hottest thing since sliced bread, I am very aware, I'm objective and very aware to know that there are people who are more beautiful than me and there are people who are less beautiful than me. But at the end of the day, it gets to that point where you also accept that your beauty has a lot to do with you, with your self-concept, with the choices you make and the attitude that you have, such that even when now you're getting to interact with people, they definitely end up acknowledging your beauty. Another thing, she lamented that people don't do things for her. And again, I can't relate. I'm always finding people wanting to do things for me, both the big things, the medium things, and the little things. And even those that seem very inconsequential, I'm always finding people wanting to do things for me. And so for her to say that she then get people do things for her, I honestly, again, cannot relate. I almost feel as though, again, it's her attitude. Yeah. She says that as a result of people not doing things for her, particularly when she goes out, she realizes, particularly when she goes out with her friends, that people don't buy her stuff, like buy her drinks or whatever, men part especially. So as a self-defense, she has chosen to self-defense mechanism, she has chosen to stay indoors, because she knows even if she goes out, she's going to be ignored anyway. Okay, so it's almost as if she feels sexually invisible. In fact, she gives this story of her birthday. She had gone all out, bought a new outfit, done her makeup nicely, and then she walked into the restaurant where they were supposed to be having her birthday, and there was a group of guys and nobody noticed her. And then her friend came in barely 5 minutes after her, and this particular friend, according to her, is light skinned, so of course there's that element of colorism and texturism that I was talking about earlier. And her friend had barely done anything to herself in terms of her how she looked, and she was turning heads. And so she felt, like, how is it that she has put up all this effort, and her friend has not done anything, yet her friend is getting all the attention? And so that really made her feel like she's not good enough, regardless of whatever she does, whatever input she puts it on, effort she puts into herself, she's always going to remain invisible. Nobody wants to be invisible, including those who consider themselves to be introverts. Nobody wants to be invisible. We all want, not necessarily to be noticed per se, but even just to have our existence acknowledged. So it was really sad to hear her say that she felt in that moment, particularly her birthday where she had put in the effort, she felt invisible. Then she went on to state that that particular friend, the light skin friend, is actually married, and she basically just met her husband in a bar, and she, Stefco now, does not believe she's ever going to get married. And that crushed me. It did not crush me in the sense that obviously not all of us want to get married, but it seems that that is one thing that she'd love to have, but for some reason she feels she's not worthy to be married, and she may not actually get somebody who's interested enough or who loves her enough to actually want to marry her. Now, again, let me remind you what I said earlier, that I genuinely look at this chick and I see like we resemble. We could actually pass off for sisters. So for her to say all these things, it was a bit puzzling and baffling. At the same time, like I mentioned, I don't like watching her videos because I find her to be a bit negative, a bit of a Debbie Downer, and she has quite a low self-esteem. I do not know where that came from. I don't know her life story, but I don't like that energy. And this particular video really reeked of that low self-esteem, reeked of her just wanting to be validated, particularly outside validation. And you see, part of self-concept is you validating yourself. You cannot, obviously we all want to be validated externally in one way or the other, but you cannot rely on other people to give you self-esteem. That's why it's called self-esteem. That's why it's called self-love. It all has to start with you, and it all begins with how you view yourself. So for her to say something like that, and even she went on later on to actually confess that, ordinarily she doesn't put in much effort in her appearance, and I bet you it has to do with the fact that she does not love herself enough to want to put in effort. Because if you love yourself, you're going to put in the effort, you're going to nurture yourself, you're going to take care of yourself. But if your self-concept is so low, if you value yourself so dismally, you're not going to put in the effort. I take a lot of pride in how I look. I take a lot of pride in taking care of myself, in nurturing myself, because more than even, obviously I'd love for people to notice how I look and to appreciate how I look, but even more importantly, I do it for myself. And so for her to actually say that people don't do nice stuff for her, I mean, if she can't do it for herself, how does she expect other people to do nice stuff for herself? I mean, people cannot give you what you do not give yourself. So in as much as I do to some degree empathize with her, honestly speaking, I kind of feel like she's creating her own misery. She's creating her own suffering. She's invisible because she wants to be invisible. She's not getting special treatment because, first and foremost, she does not give herself the special treatment. She has quite a victim mentality. And you see, the whole idea of pretty privilege, even before other people recognize your beauty and your worth, you have to recognize your beauty and your worth. Even before other people give you that privilege, you give yourself that privilege. You treat yourself well. You nurture yourself. You hype yourself up. You wake up and you know that you're a 10 out of 10. Doesn't matter how other people look in comparison to you, but you are the hottest thing since sliced bread. Yeah, I know it might sound narcissistic and it might sound shallow, but at the end of the day, we have to navigate this world in the body we are given in the vessel we are given in. And if we do not hype ourselves up, and if we do not believe in ourselves, how do we expect other people to hype us, and how do we expect them to love us? I genuinely, if there's somebody I love on this earth, it's me, it's myself. I genuinely love myself from the bottom of my heart. And I thank God every day for creating me who I am. And I do not wish for anybody to honestly look at themselves the way this lady Steph Cole views themselves, because it's very miserable. It's a very miserable way of existing. Yeah. So I'd wish for more women to actually believe in themselves. I wish for more women to actually have this self-concept of themselves, that you build your self-esteem, you tell stories about yourself to yourself that actually validate you, that actually make you feel worthy, that actually make you feel beautiful. Because the vessel you've been given, that the body you have, is the only vessel you're going to navigate this world in. So if you don't love yourself, it's going to be a very miserable existence. Just tell yourself stories that uplift you. Tell yourself stories that validate you. Tell yourself stories that hype you up. I have a full-length mirror in my bedroom, and especially after I take a shower and after I have oiled my body, I just stare at myself. I stare at my eyes, I stare at my hair, I stare at every little bitty bump on my body, and I love everything. Am I perfect? No, but in my eyes, I am everything I'm supposed to be. Would I wish for some things to change? Obviously, yes, but my imperfections are perfect to me, because the vessel that I have is helping me do the things that I'm able to do. It's helping me to exercise. It's helping me take care of my home and my family. It's helping me to exist and just be happy. And so when you talk about pretty privilege, I really wish people would really realize that pretty privilege first and foremost begins with them, not so much how others see you. Because like I told you earlier, you may be the hottest thing, but if you do not feel like the hottest thing and you have low self-esteem, nobody is going to really appreciate that beauty. So let this be call to all of you, to all women, to really love yourself, to really deconstruct any negative self-concept you have about yourself, and to reconstruct positive ones, and to really question, where did the rain start beating you? At what point? And I'm going to discuss this in one of the videos, how some of our self-concepts come about. At what point did your self-esteem get wounded? Because there's both nature and nurture comes into play. We find that obviously the people who are born very confident, but because of their experiences, it can end up making them have low self-esteem. On the other hand, the people who are born quite shy or may not necessarily have the highest self-esteem, but then experiences again build them up and they're able to have high self-esteem. So I'm going to also look at later on in one of the videos, I'm going to look at, where negative self-concept comes in, and particularly how mothers are important, particularly to ladies, in terms of building their self-concept. So until next time, keep smiling, keep shining, and please love yourself, love on yourself, love yourself, nurture yourself, have a positive self-concept, because that is the only vessel that you have. And I wouldn't wish for anybody to have a miserable concept and be miserable as they lead this life. So until next time, toodles.